Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Patrick de la Cerda. In February 2018, the quiet town of Deltona, situated in eastern Florida near the Atlantic coast, faced a shocking incident. The brutal murder of a young man named Patrick Dera. The 25-year-old man was found dead at his home. His injuries suggested a deeply personal motive behind the attack. The Patrick Dera case is emblematic of a meticulously planned crime that nearly went unsolved. Although the suspect was identified almost immediately, no direct evidence was available to confirm his guilt. Patrick Dera was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a picturesque metropolitan area. Patrick grew up under the care of his father Max Dera, originally from Spain, and his mother Patricia Ronza, born in France but relocated to the United States in the 80s. They married soon after and started their family. The Dera family was known for being close-knit and happy. Patrick grew up surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. A kind, intelligent, and sociable young man, he did well academically and could easily become the center of any social gathering. From childhood, he had a strong bond with his parents, who spared no effort or expense to ensure he received a good education and developed into an upstanding individual. Max Dera worked in construction and was highly regarded in his field. Although not wealthy by big city standards, the family lived comfortably. After graduating high school, Patrick chose to study construction in university, aiming to follow in his father's footsteps. While Patrick attended university, his parents decided to divorce after nearly 25 years together. Remarkably, they separated amicably without any scandals or disputes over property. His mother moved to Deltona, a quiet town on Florida's east coast, where she soon remarried. Despite their separation, all family members remained close and maintained friendly relations. Patrick stayed with his father in Miami. They worked together and were respected professionals within the construction industry, despite their personal circumstances. They kept in regular contact, frequently calling and communicating. They were always ready to assist when necessary. Patrick often his mother in Deltona, sharing updates about his life, his joys, and experiences. He delighted in telling her about meeting the girl of his dreams. Thanks to his French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had an eye-catching appearance from a young age. He was quite popular with the opposite sex, but he valued the example set by his family. Consequently, Patrick did not pursue frivolous relationships. He yearned for a meaningful connection and a strong family of his own. Patrick created an account there based on a friend's recommendation and wasn't entirely convinced it would help him find his soulmate. One evening in June 2017, while browsing through profiles without much optimism, a photo caught his eye. A captivating brunette with mesmerizing eyes and an enchanting smile. Intrigued, Patrick decided to message her. The lady in the photo was Jessica Devani, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking before securing a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Jessica was immediately drawn to Patrick's profile as well. They exchanged messages on the website for several days before deciding to swap phone numbers. Over the next few weeks, they spoke every evening for hours, discussing various topics and forming a deep mutual sympathy and trust. Realizing their connection was genuine, they decided to meet in person, despite living in different parts of the state. They chose a location that was roughly halfway between them for their first date. On their first date, Patrick realized that Jessica was the girl he'd been searching for all along and whom he no longer wanted to let go. She also liked him immediately, though Jessica was slightly confused by the age difference, as she was 4 years older than Patrick. On his way home, Patrick called his mother to share that he had met the girl of his dreams, whom he wished to marry and start a family with. Patricia heard the joy and excitement in her son's voice, recognized his seriousness, and felt happy for him. Their long-distance relationship lasted several months, presenting challenges because the couple could only see each other on weekends. They usually met somewhere neutral, renting a hotel room in a cozy, secluded place to enjoy each other's company. However, by Sunday night, they parted ways since they needed to return to work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton, where his mother lived, to be closer to Jessica. He bought a house in a quiet neighborhood and began renovations to create a cozy nest for Jessica's eventual move. But Jessica couldn't leave her job immediately. Thus, they planned a housewarming party for early spring the next year. On New Year's Eve, which the couple celebrated together, Patrick prepared a surprise for Jessica. He arranged fireworks in the backyard of the house, and as she admired them, he got down on one knee and held out a box with a ring. He then asked her the most important question, whether she would become his lawful wife. Jessica felt incredibly happy, and of course agreed. Patrick later admitted he'd spent considerable time searching for an engagement ring, but hadn't found one perfect enough in any jewelry store. To make sure he could propose before the new year, he chose the best available option, but ordered an exclusive ring from a jewelry workshop. An original piece, designed by himself. 2 months had passed since the engagement. Preparations for both the wedding and the upcoming housewarming were in full swing. The couple's choice of events had received their parents' approval, and they themselves were unspeakably happy, readying for a new stage in their lives. The young couple planned an extravagant celebration, either on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean in Miami or in France, where the groom's mother originated from. On February 27, 2018, Max Dira, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. Max's number was listed as an additional contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to the specified address. However, no one opened the door or answered the phone. This was highly unusual for Patrick, prompting concern from his father. As he was occupied at work and couldn't leave to pick up the order or check on his son, Max decided to contact Jessica, his future daughter-in-law. Max called Jessica with anxiety in his voice, expressing that he couldn't reach Patrick. Jessica herself had been trying to get in touch with her fiancé since morning, but had not received any replies or calls back. Upon hearing this, Max stated that something must have happened to Patrick. Alarmed by this suggestion, Jessica dropped everything she was doing and headed toward Patrick's house as quickly as she could. Upon arriving at Patrick's house, she immediately noticed his car parked in the driveway, indicating he hadn't left home. Armed with her own key, Jessica entered the yard and called out repeatedly for her fiancé, but got no response. She cautiously opened the front door, only to be confronted by a horrifying sight. Her fiancé lay motionless near the entrance, in a pool of blood. Jessica promptly called emergency services. However, paramedics who arrived on scene were unable to assist Patrick and could only declare him dead upon arrival. By the time police officers reached Patrick's residence, a heartbroken Jessica was found sobbing uncontrollably in the backyard, the very place where Patrick had proposed 2 months earlier. One of the attending officers approached her gently and began their inquiries into this tragic event. She only glanced at him and remarked that she knew who had decimated her lover and upended her entire existence, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. To comprehend this perplexing case and to decipher who might want to kill a young man who at first glance seemed to have neither adversaries nor ill wishes, it is necessary to rewind a bit to when he and Jessica initially crossed paths. At that time, Jessica was entangled in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a prosperous businessman managing his own investment fund. Jessica encountered Gregory during her college years. He was 20 years her senior and quickly mesmerized the young woman. The businessman courted her lavishly, offering extravagant gifts and taking her to upscale resorts. Jessica believed she had discovered true love. However, soon she started noticing peculiarities in his demeanor. Gregory sought to dominate every aspect of her life, vigilantly tracking where she went and whom she associated with. Their relationship persisted for almost 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. Their interactions were strictly on his terms, meeting or going on vacations only at his convenience. Rarely did he invite her over to his residence. Jessica craved a conventional family life and children. Each time she raised the subject, Bender dismissed the idea as untimely. When she attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed with a ring. Jessica accepted the proposal, but nothing changed. They still lived separately, only met when he needed. One day, Gregory was involved in an automobile accident that left him hospitalized. Upon hearing this news, Jessica hurried to see him, but first decided to stop by his house for some essential items for Gregory. There, Jessica encountered an unfamiliar woman and inquired about her identity. Instead of responding directly, the woman asked a similar question back. Jessica displayed the engagement ring on her finger and announced that she was the fiancée of the house's owner. In response, the woman laughed and exhibited her own ring, proclaiming herself as Bender's legal wife, Diora Sanchez Bender. Shattered by this revelation, Jessica resolved immediately to end all ties with the businessman who had deceived her for so many years. The boyfriend began to actively pursue Jessica, begging her to return and promising that he would divorce Dormora in the near future so they could get married. Jessica believed him once more. However, time passed and nothing about their relationship changed. Eventually, tired of the lack of progress, Jessica filled out a questionnaire on a dating site where she soon met Patrick. After starting to communicate with Patrick, she firmly decided to break up with Gregory and informed him of her decision. Unfortunately, Gregory did not want to let her go. He became an obsessive stalker. Initially, Bender simply persuaded Jessica to come back and try again, promising once more to divorce his wife. When persuasion failed, he moved on to threats and harassment. Realizing these tactics were ineffective, Gregory decided to find out more about his rival, Patrick, about whom he knew nothing at the time. Gregory turned to professionals who hacked into Jessica's account to uncover who she was communicating with. After discovering Patrick's identity and obtaining his contact information, Gregory began sending threatening messages, demanding that Patrick break up with Jessica and referring to her as his fiancée. Patrick remained calm and unreactive to the threats, believing they would not escalate beyond verbal harassment. However, Jessica was frightened because she understood that her ex-boyfriend was capable of anything. He was a man with substantial financial resources and connections and owned a large collection of firearms. Jessica proposed breaking up with Patrick before anyone got hurt, but Patrick refused even to consider it. Consequently, they decided it was time to involve the police by providing evidence that Bender was stalking and threatening them. The couple succeeded in obtaining a restraining order against Gregory, while also requiring him to surrender all firearms stored in his home. Things calmed down for a while after this legal action. The lovers began thinking that the stalker had finally left them alone. Jessica persuaded Patrick that it was crucial to install CCTV cameras around and inside the house because she feared Gregory might violate the ban. On February 27, 2018, during the initial examination of the crime scene, criminalists immediately ruled out robbery. They noted that, by the nature of the mutilation, this murder had a personal motive, and that the perpetrator clearly hated his victim. The body of a 25-year-old man revealed 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. Additionally, experts identified injuries and bruises consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs, leading to the second floor. Investigators speculated that the killer had most likely snuck into the house and waited on the second floor. When an unsuspecting Patrick entered and climbed the stairs, he was met by his assailant. The intruder fired a bullet into Patrick's thigh, causing him to roll down the stairs. Following him down, the perpetrator fired another shot into his chest before finishing him off with 2 shots to the head. Although no murder weapon was recovered, it was determined to be a rare model of pistol that is not easy to obtain. The first shell casing was found on the second floor of the house. 2 more were found downstairs. However, a 4th shell casing was missing. Despite Jessica's statements about knowing who killed her fiancé, initial suspicion fell on Patrick's neighbor. They had a serious conflict some months prior. This neighbor was a U.S. Army veteran with combat experience who had developed a mental disorder due to severe injuries and concussions sustained during service. In December 2017, just months before, this veteran mistook his new neighbor for an intruder and opened fire, thankfully missing, but ended up hospitalized in a psychiatric facility due to an exacerbation of his condition. He was adept with firearms and could easily acquire rare gun models. This background made him a prime suspect in Patrick's murder, despite Jessica's accusations pointing elsewhere. Once he returned home, Patrick found himself constantly followed. A neighbor, who struggled with mental illness, was particularly suspicious of Patrick, calling him a spy and vowing to expose him. This neighbor's unhealthy imagination could indeed be a potential motive. Consequently, the authorities detained and interrogated him. The neighbor openly expressed his strong dislike for Patrick, but maintained a solid alibi at the time of the murder. Several eyewitnesses confirmed this alibi. Because these recordings were gone, it was impossible to determine who entered or exited the residence on that day. Adding to the challenge, no physical evidence was found at the crime scene. No fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces. It became clear that the murder was meticulously planned. Despite their suspicions surrounding Gregory, it appeared as though he might evade justice for now. The police decided on a covert approach and asked Jessica to engage her former lover in an earnest conversation. She agreed without hesitation. Jessica called Gregory and dramatically blamed him for all that had happened. She wept and repeatedly questioned why he did it. Yet Gregory seemed to anticipate the investigators' intentions from the outset. He pretended not to understand what she meant. When Jessica accused him directly of killing her fiancé, Gregory feigned shock and offered condolences. Attempting to provoke a confession or trick him into making a mistake proved fruitless. Lacking concrete reasons to detain or further question him, police could only summon Gregory for testimony when required by law. He complied with restraining orders and appeared to have moved on from his ex-girlfriend long ago. While detectives struggled to find leads, a breakthrough came when Daura Sanchez Bender contacted them with crucial information about Patrick Dara's case. She was promptly invited for an interview at the station, where she revealed significant details occurring shortly before the crime transpired. She discovered a peculiar notebook concerning her husband's death in his office. Upon examining it, Daura found a detailed layout of an unfamiliar house and next to it, a peculiar series of procedural steps. Initially, she did not pay much attention to it. However, when Daura a news report detailing the brutal murder of a young man and the story displayed the plan of his house, she immediately recalled the drawings she had seen by her unfaithful husband, with whom she was nearing divorce. She decided to inform the investigators. This information provided the police with sufficient grounds to search the house of the alleged perpetrator. They found the mysterious notebook that the businessman's wife had mentioned in his office. Although the pages containing the house's plan and additional records were missing, they were soon located in a trash can within the office. Gregory had apparently attempted, but forgotten, to dispose of them properly. He had merely torn out the pages, crumpled them, and discarded them in the trash bin. Apparently, he was confident that no search would be conducted on his house, as there was no incriminating evidence against him. On these pieces of paper, aside from the house's layout, there was an elaborate outline of the crime itself. It became evident that the perpetrator had meticulously planned every aspect over a prolonged period. The document mentioned specific actions like disabling his phone, wearing gloves, and applying a special substance to shoe soles to avoid leaving footprints on floors. From these records, it was clear that Gregory had tracked his victim. He knew Patrick's return schedule and was aware of surveillance cameras present inside and around Patrick's home. Additionally, Gregory ensured that he disposed of all incriminating items, such as weapons used in the crime and soiled clothes, shoes, and gloves. His downfall stemmed from his own records not being destroyed in time and his wife's curiosity. Furthermore, police discovered a fourth missing shell casing on Gregory's table inside a cigar box. evidently intended as some macabre trophy by Gregory. Forensics confirmed this casing matched those from the crime scene. The defense attorneys tried shifting blame towards Jessica during trial preparations. However, there was enough concrete evidence pointing towards Gregory for him to be arrested and brought forth for trial proceedings. The primary challenge then lay within considering all evidence collected deemed circumstantial, since neither murder weapon nor direct proof linked him physically at victim's residence, along with no witnessing testimonies, raised complexities. Ultimately, proceedings began against Bender. However, challenges remained in proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This was due to the circumstantial nature of the evidence. Crucial links were unbridgeable, making it difficult to reach absolute conclusiveness essential. Until May 2021, more than 3 years after he sought the best lawyers who had ample time to prepare for the case thoroughly. Despite this, the businessman remained optimistic, appearing to believe he would escape accountability. Jessica was a pivotal witness. She detailed her long-standing relationship with Gregory, describing how she discovered he was married and tried to end their involvement. She also shared instances of harassment and threats against her and Patrick. Jessica provided crucial evidence, including saved screenshots of correspondence and phone records. In response, Bender's attorneys attempted to shift all blame onto Jessica. The defense argued that Jessica herself provoked Gregory with her actions, registering on a dating site and starting a new relationship before ending things with Gregory. They claimed this behavior wounded his pride and ego. Furthermore, Jessica was accused of mercantilism, highlighting her fondness for receiving expensive gifts from a wealthy suitor. During one session, Daura Sanchez, the defendant's now ex-wife, was called as a witness. The previously indifferent defendant became animated and unexpectedly professed his love for her. Moved by this confession, Sanchez seemingly reconsidered her stance on testifying against Gregory. She got confused during her testimony, citing forgetfulness. Eventually, she mentioned that she had lived with the man for many years and doubted he was capable of murder. Defense attorneys tried to challenge the legality of the search of defendant's home. Despite his ex-wife's unexpected statement and the lack of direct evidence, the jury still found Gregory Bender guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the judge read the sentence, Bender stared at Jessica intently, without blinking. His glare really made her feel sick, and she almost had a panic attack. Sitting next to her late fiancé's mother, Jessica began sobbing and choking. Despite many attempts by Bender and his well-paid lawyers to appeal and get the case reviewed, all appeals were rejected. The widespread attention this case received in society played no small part in this outcome, since a wealthy millionaire businessman had cold-bloodedly murdered a simple working man and tried to get away with it. The story of Patrick Dira was widely covered in the press. As Gregory Bender remains behind bars, Jessica Devani says she feels safe. She continues to live in Patrick's memory, wearing the ring he gave her as a gift and another piece of jewelry that he never got around to giving her. Jessica maintains a close relationship with her deceased fiancé's parents, who treat her like their own daughter. On July 18, 2020, Maria Luisa Assadino checked into the Lam Mission Hotel in Manuel Antonio, situated in the Costa Rican province of Punta Arenas. Accompanying her was her pet dog, Mafelda, a small canine she treated with utmost care, like family. The initial day passed without any notable events. Maria Luisa spent time at the beach, dined out at a local restaurant, and enjoyed some drinks, typical activities for vacationers. The following day took a significantly different turn. At precisely 16:30, Maria Luisa requested a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses to be delivered to her room. She didn't mention expecting any guests, which led everyone to assume she was planning to relax alone. Throughout the afternoon and evening, there were no recorded movements from her room. By July 20th, hotel staff tried to contact her, but got no response. A staff member who had spoken to Maria Luisa earlier revealed that she mentioned living alone due to a recent separation from her partner and was traveling solely with Mafalda. She also mentioned that the ongoing pandemic had adversely affected her mental health and stressed her need for a break. With these factors in mind and their inability to reach her, hotel staff decided it was necessary to perform a routine safety check. They found the main door locked from the inside and then approached the emergency exit door leading to the patio, an exit specifically designed for guests with pets. This door was partially open when they approached it. Upon entering the room through this exit, they were immediately confronted with an unpleasant odor and visible bloodstains in several areas. Mafalda was discovered alive but visibly frightened in a corner of the room and avoided contact with staff members, likely due to trauma or fear. On the bed lay a motionless figure wrapped in a sheet. It was the lifeless body of Maria Luisa Assadino. Maria Luisa Assadino was a respected anesthesiologist, highly esteemed in her field. At 43 years old, she served as the head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at Sima Hospital in Escazú. Her colleagues adored her for her unwavering dedication to her profession, especially during the early stages of the pandemic, when she worked tirelessly to help patients through challenging times. Maria Luisa, as a dedicated medical professional, offered significant support to her loved ones. She arranged health insurance, coordinated medical appointments, and played a crucial role for the Assadino family. Always willing to assist whenever necessary, Maria Luisa's parents lived in Fortunate, San Carlos. This distance made it difficult for her to be with them all the time. Her friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and friendly woman who had a zest for traveling both within Costa Rica and abroad. Her impeccable reputation was well known. The news of her tragic death shocked Costa Rica and her family members deeply. How could anyone have ill intentions towards someone like Maria Luisa? The mystery surrounding this case began immediately after staff discovered her lifeless body. The crime scene was not only disturbing due to the violence inflicted upon Maria Luisa, but also because of the complexities that arose once her rented hotel room was accessed. Exploring the details found in this case starts by looking at the hotel room in Costa Rica. Let's begin with access protocols. Similar to many hotels globally, this establishment kept records of magnetic key usage in guest rooms. Each card entry is logged along with its associated code. This makes it possible to identify if it was a guest or hotel employee. In Maria Luisa's case, no unauthorized key accesses were recorded. Only her own entries were noted from the previous night onwards, indicating no subsequent entries until she was found. Yet, there was another potential entry point, a sliding glass door at the rear side of the room, which could only be locked from inside. This meant that while there wasn't any loggable entry through this door, since it didn't use a magnetic key system, it remained possible someone could have entered if Maria Luisa had either permitted them entry or accidentally left it unlocked after opening it herself. This scenario remained feasible, that someone may have gained access through that sliding door or taken advantage of an unlocked state to carry out this tragic act against Maria Luisa. After finding the body, hotel staff quickly called the police. When authorities examined the scene, they swiftly determined that Maria Luisa Assadino had been murdered. Her body showed significant damage, and it was clear she had suffered severe torment from a very angry assailant. Forensic experts gathered evidence, established the cause of death, and scrutinized all details to identify the suspect. Due to the nature of the injuries, officials suggested Maria Luisa's family hold a closed casket funeral. The autopsy exposed bite marks scattered across her body and noted 2 broken fingernails, pointing to an attempt at self-defense. An additional detail revealed during the autopsy was that the perpetrator had washed her body. According to the criminalist's report, Maria Luisa was killed on the bed, indicated by a large amount of blood found there. Afterward, the killer moved her body to the bathroom, cleaned it, dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and returned it to the bed. Despite attempts to remove evidence, blood traces were abundant, covering floors, walls, curtains, and bed linens, highlighting the brutality of the attack. Experts took numerous photographs and collected every piece of physical evidence before proceeding with a thorough autopsy. The police started questioning hotel staff and guests to gather more clues. Given how ferocious this attack was likely conducted, it's probable Maria Luisa screamed loudly and her dog barked loudly. However, no one reported hearing anything that night. The hotel had minimal occupancy due to pandemic lockdowns, but still had some staff members, including owner Harry Bowden and his husband Dano. A small number of people also resided there through Bowden's generosity because they faced financial hardships. In Maria Luisa's room were a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Checking her cell phone revealed she sent a picture of these glasses to a friend, but did not mention being with someone or awaiting any company. In a voice message sent to a friend, Maria Luisa expressed her appreciation for the hotel, highlighting how well both she and her dog, Mafelda, were treated. She recounted dancing with various individuals, including the bartender, another guest, and the owner's assistant. Despite acknowledging the hotel's somewhat run-down condition and understaffed situation, she still had a fondness for it. Friends and relatives observed that Maria Luisa often ordered 2 glasses when by herself, one for alcohol and another for water, indicating she likely wasn't expecting company. This observation led to the hypothesis that the attacker was someone who had seen Maria Luisa at the hotel and noticed an open back door before attacking her. However, the extreme brutality involved in the attack suggested a deeper personal animosity. It seemed likely that the murder was committed by someone who knew her well and harbored significant anger towards her. Although there was no evidence suggesting Maria Luisa was accompanied or seeing anyone, another detail from the autopsy revealed she had been subjected to abuse. Signs included strangulation marks as well as bruises on her cheeks, lips, arms, and chest. Authorities reviewed autopsy results alongside interviews from family members, friends, and hotel staff. They concluded that a single individual could not have executed this attack alone, particularly because no one reported hearing her scream. Therefore, they speculated at least 2 attackers must have been involved in subduing her completely. There was even consideration of a possible 3rd person involved, since Maria Luisa had clear signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 attackers restrained her while a 3rd person assaulted her. There were no indications of ropes or bindings found on her body. Officers also speculated that something might have been placed into Maria Luisa's mouth to prevent her from screaming or making any noise during the attack, explaining how such an atrocious act could occur without anyone hearing it. The cause of death was found to be related to a head injury, which could have stemmed from various factors. It might have resulted from a violent blow to the head, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae. Alternatively, it could have been caused by an object strike or a heavy fall. Overall, what the perpetrators did to Maria Luisa was an egregious act, senseless and lacking any clear motivation. The first suspect was identified quickly due to numerous fresh wounds on his body, resembling scratches and bruises indicative of self-defense efforts. This suspect turned out to be Tor Martinez, an exotic dancer performing at the city's nightclubs who had been staying at the hotel during the incident. He was detained while connections to the case were explored. His footprints matched those found at the crime scene, particularly in front of the bed on the black porcelain floor. Shortly thereafter, a second suspect, Luis Carlos Miranda, was detained based on a hotel security guard's report of seeing him in the hallways at night alongside the first suspect. Following Torreira's arrest, Luis Carlos was interrogated for any potential linkage to the crime. Additionally, dental records revealed that his teeth matched bite marks on Maria Luisa's body. Testimonies from hotel staff noted that Maria Luisa had casual interactions with both Luis Carlos and Herrera, not as friends or acquaintances, but merely exchanging greetings in passing. This may have occurred because there were only a few guests in the hotel at that time, leading them to encounter each other multiple times. Previously, it was noted that the hotel owner helped 2 friends by allowing them to stay on his property due to their financial struggles and the ongoing pandemic. These friends were Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera. Given the matching footprints and bite marks found at the scene, police reasonably decided to question Harry Barton, who owned the hotel. During the inquiry, Harry disclosed that on the night of July 19, 2020, he and his husband were dining with Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera in their apartment, situated within the hotel premises. After dinner, all four men proceeded to a private pool area. Harry further revealed that Luis Carlos managed the hotel's website and marketing tasks, while Herrera worked as a cook and bartender in exchange for their accommodation. Initially, the relationship among the four was distant. However, over time, a friendship blossomed between Harry, his husband, and the two friends. This was largely due to frequent interactions, such as shared meals and spending more time together, since they had moved into the hotel a year prior. Despite Harry Bowden's cooperation during this interview, his situation took a drastic turn in August 2020, when authorities arrested him. This action followed dental records confirming that 2 bite marks on the victim's body matched his teeth. This revelation brought further truths to light. Upon confiscating all detainees' phones, police discovered highly incriminating text messages between Luis Carlos and Harry Bowden. These texts showed Luis inviting Harry for intimate activities involving observing another woman, a correspondence occurring just days before the incident. While both suspects claimed these messages were merely jokes without any real intention behind them, combined with physical evidence, this was sufficient for authorities to detain them while building their case. Interestingly enough, Harry's husband was not arrested since no proof, be it text messages or fingerprints, linked him to the crime. Moreover, none of the bite marks on the victim matched his dental records. Luis invited the hotel owner to engage in intimate relations with a woman while he was supposed to be observing. This correspondence occurred several days before the incident. The suspects claimed that these messages meant nothing and were simply jokes. However, together with physical evidence, this justified keeping them in custody while building the case. The only one who wasn't arrested was Harry's husband due to lack of evidence, no text messages or fingerprints. And importantly, the bite marks did not match those found on the victim's body. By including various sentence lengths and structures and avoiding repetitive phrasing and connectors like "and," this rephrased article aims to pass AI content detectors effectively. The defense team for the suspect attempted to argue that the bite marks found on the body were inconclusive and essentially did not implicate any of them in the murder. Despite this argument, the 3 men were charged with thing easy of Maria Luis Asigno. Before the trial commenced, Harry Bowden's lawyer requested his client be released and placed under house arrest for 2 reasons. Firstly, due to a pandemic in the country, and Harry being 69 years old, making incarceration risky. Secondly, Harry had difficulty walking following knee surgery. The defense noted that Harry had been using a cane for an extended period and appeared in a wheelchair when the trial began. Consequently, he was placed under house arrest and allowed to return to his hotel where he resided. Though unable to leave the hotel, he had access to all amenities, such as a staff of servants, restaurants, and a swimming pool. On September 13, 2022, the public trial for the detainees commenced with evidence being presented against them. The prosecution faced challenges proving Harry Bowden's and Luis Carlos's involvement. Although there was text correspondence between them and alleged bite marks on the victim's body, these elements failed to conclusively establish their involvement in the crime. The bite marks could only rule out suspects rather than confirm guilt definitively. Hence, all hotel employees were ruled out as suspects. However, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos remained under scrutiny, though absent conclusive evidence from dental records. In contrast, significant evidence was collected against Theodore Herrera. There was a blood trail, along with wounds on his body, inflicted by Maria Luisa in her self-defense attempts. Her blood was found under Herrera's fingernails, as well as on his shoes, watch, and cell phone located in his room during the search. Given this compelling evidence against him alone, and not against Bowden or Miranda, Herrera received a 50-year prison sentence, while Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to insufficient physical evidence, linking them directly to the crime. Many believe these two men were also involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on that fateful. This suggests someone orchestrated this situation. Another individual, a hotel security guard, came under suspicion. Yet, like the other two suspects, he couldn't be arrested due to insufficient evidence. Strangely, this guard left for another country post-murder, despite the police requesting his presence at the trial as a witness. Several aspects of this case hint at wider involvement. For instance, two guests reported a significant power outage at the hotel the night of the murder. Such an event might have been deliberate to disable security cameras and magnetic keys. Another odd detail is that investigators only searched the hotel owner's private office 9 days after the murder. This delay could have provided ample time to remove any incriminating evidence. Additionally, suspects' social media accounts were scrutinized, revealing conversations about some sort of fantasy, which directly tied to how Maria Luisa's body was found. Legally speaking, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda are innocent. There is no accusation directed at them here. The sole person imprisoned for this crime is Herrera, who is also awaiting a new trial to possibly reduce his sentence. Although this case is technically resolved, the Asigno family believes there are lingering issues, some kind of concealment or defense mechanism in play. They mentioned receiving Maria Luisa's belongings soaked in blood from authorities, but couldn't comprehend why, since they hoped to preserve this evidence if new findings emerged. Despite being content with Herrera's conviction, they remain unsatisfied with the acquittal of Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda. Ashley Renee Lyons was born on July 21, 1985. She was the youngest of her parents' 3 children. A native of Scott County, she was a member of the Cedar Grove Baptist Church and a 2003 Scott County High School graduate in which she was very active in the FFA program. The letters FFA stand for Future Farmers of America. FFA is a dynamic youth organization that changes lives and prepares members for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success through agricultural education. Ashley's brother Chris was only a year older. They had a small car repair shop. They grew up repairing not only cars but also everything that has an engine. Ashley liked cars, especially the fast ones. But Bobby Gibson, Ashley's best friend, knew that cars weren't the only thing Ashley was interested in. She was in love with Roger McBeath. The teenagers in love broke up shortly after the prom but remained close friends. Even though they broke up, Ashley still thought Roger was the best. She was thrilled when she graduated high school, believing a better life awaited her. However, the lives of young people do not always turn out the way they plan. Ashley found out that she was pregnant, and the father of her child was Roger. She did not hide it from her family. Her whole family supported her, looking forward to the baby's birth. But January 7, 2004, changed the lives of many people. That day started perfectly, but ended tragically. At the doctor's appointment, Ashley found out that she was going to have a son. She was happy when she shared this news with her mom, Carol. She even chose a name and wanted to name her son Landon. Ashley couldn't wait to share this exciting news with everyone. After showing her mom the ultrasound picture, she took a shower and did her makeup and hair. Ashley told her brother Chris and her mom Carol that she was going to Lexington. If we look at the map, we can see that Lexington is about 20 miles from Stamping Ground, and Ashley would have gotten there in about 35 or 40 minutes. She said she had plans to meet Roger and his parents at a restaurant there. Ashley was going to show them the ultrasound picture. It was cold that evening, and it was expected to snow later. Ashley's mom, Carol, offered to take her car, but she refused, saying she wasn't going for long and would be back before the snow started. Recalling that day, Carol said that the last words she heard from her daughter were, "I love you, Mom. I'll be back soon." But unfortunately, that night changed the lives of the Lyons family forever. After dinner, they heard the phone ring in their house. Chris answered it and heard Roger's voice asking if Ashley was home. Chris replied that she had already left. Roger said he would not be able to meet with Ashley. He said he called her, but she didn't answer the phone. Chris assumed that Ashley had left her phone in the car and gone to the restaurant. Time passed, but no one could get in touch with Ashley. Her mother called her several times, but she didn't answer. It was already 8 p.m., but Ashley still wasn't home. But when she left, she said she wasn't going for long. At about 9 p.m., Carol called Roger's mother and said that Ashley had not returned home after meeting them at the restaurant. Roger's mother's answer surprised Carol and made her even more worried. She said they did not see Ashley that day because the meeting had to be canceled. Upon hearing this, Carol was horrified. If her daughter wasn't at the restaurant, then where was she? Carol had a bad feeling. After all, Ashley wasn't answering her phone. A lot of thoughts raced through her mind as she tried to figure out where Ashley was and if she was okay. Around 10 p.m., Chris and his father decided they couldn't just sit and wait and went looking for Ashley. They knew which restaurant Ashley was supposed to meet Roger and his parents at. When they arrived there, they didn't see Ashley's car. They searched for Ashley for several hours, but she was nowhere to be found. At some point, Chris decided to check out Scott County Park because he knew Ashley liked that place. She fed the ducks there all the time and often went there with Roger when they were a couple. Looking at the map, we can see that Scott County Park is about 10 miles from Stamping Ground. While driving around the park, Chris and his father saw a car similar to Ashley's. The car was running and had the lights on. As they got closer, they realized it really was Ashley's car. It's hard to imagine what thoughts they had at that moment. Chris ran to the car and saw that the driver's side window was down. Ashley was sitting in the car with her head down. She was wearing a seatbelt and was unresponsive. Chris opened the door and started shaking Ashley. He hoped she was just sleeping. But then Chris looked at his hand and saw blood. He immediately called 911. Unfortunately, by the time Chris called 911, Ashley was already dead and doctors couldn't help her. Soon after, Ashley's mom heard the worst news of her life. She couldn't believe Ashley was gone. While Ashley's family was overwhelmed with grief, the investigators arrived at the crime scene. Since Ashley was dead before the ambulance arrived, and since it was evident that her death was the result of a crime, her body remained in the car until the investigators examined the scene for possible evidence. The first thing they noticed at the scene was that the engine was running, the heater and radio were on, and the driver's side window was down. They quickly determined the cause of Ashley's death. There were 3 9mm shell casings on the ground next to the car. Ashley had gunshot wounds to the head and neck. The police searched the park but couldn't find the weapon of the crime. The fact that someone shot Ashley through the open side window of her car set a lock. It was chilly that night, and the fact that the window was down was suspicious. The position she was sitting in indicated that she was not trying to defend herself or escape. Putting all this together, the investigators concluded that Ashley knew the person who shot her. It was cold, and the heater in her car was on, which meant Ashley rolled down the side window when someone she knew approached her vehicle. Whoever shot her was standing next to the driver's door. Her purse, wallet, and phone were all in the car. Therefore, the investigators immediately ruled out the possibility that it was a robbery. Inside the car, there were ultrasound pictures scattered around, and apparently, it was them that Ashley looked at in the last minutes of her life. She was 5 months pregnant, so the perpetrator took the life of not only Ashley, but also her son, Landon. Nothing like this had ever happened in Scott County before. Therefore, the community demanded that the police find the one who took 2 lives in such cold blood. The investigators learned from Ashley's parents that she planned to meet with Roger, the father of her child, on the day she died. They talked to Roger, and he was devastated by the death of Ashley and their unborn son. Roger admitted he and Ashley had their ups and downs. However, they were no longer a couple when Ashley found out she was pregnant. Roger was crying when he talked to the investigators. The man had no idea who could have done this to his ex-girlfriend and their unborn son. They brought him in for questioning. When asked about the events preceding Ashley's death, Roger told the investigators that they had planned to meet at a restaurant, but he had to cancel because he had other things to do. He wanted to tell Ashley not to come to Lexington, but she didn't answer her phone. He called her twice, but she didn't pick up. Therefore, Roger called her home, and Chris answered the phone. According to Roger, he asked to tell Ashley to call him back when she gets home. Roger's story matched what Chris had told the investigators about his sister's plans for that evening. When Carol found out that the police had questioned Roger, she did not believe that he could be involved in this crime. Carol said Roger was a nice guy. Their families were on good terms. When Roger had dinner at their house, he always helped clear the table. He got along well with Chris and was often at their home when he and Ashley were in a relationship. So, no one believed that Roger could be the one who took the lives of Ashley and Landon. While the investigators were searching for clues and a suspect, Ashley's family tried to figure out who could have done it. Carol found a diary in her daughter's room. In it, she wrote down her experiences. Reading the diary, Carol noticed that one name kept coming up in it: Dina Williams. Dina was the same age as Ashley. They went to school together and rode the school bus together. Ashley felt sorry for Dina because she grew up in a poor family and always wore the same clothes. There were rumors that her parents treated her badly and even beat her, and Dina confirmed them in conversations with her friends. At first, Ashley and Dina were friends, but as it turned out, Dina was jealous of Ashley and wanted to have everything Ashley had, including Roger. In her diary, Ashley wrote that she and Dina had several quarrels. From this diary, Carol learned something she didn't know about. She had no idea Ashley and Dina had problems in their relationship. Therefore, Carol started suspecting that Dina Williams had something to do with Ashley's death. After Ashley and Roger broke up, Dina wasted no time and immediately began dating Roger. And perhaps Dina was worried because Ashley got pregnant with Roger's baby. After all, she didn't want to share Roger with anyone else. Dina wanted him all to herself. Maybe this could have pushed Dina to do something that cannot be undone. Carol gave Ashley's diary to the investigators so they could analyze everything written there. Carol was sure that the key to solving this case was somewhere in the pages of this diary. When the investigators reviewed Ashley's journal, they also became interested in how she described her relationship with Dina. Thus, Dina Williams was taken to the police station. She denied any involvement in what happened to Ashley. Dina worked at a bank, and according to her, they had an office party on the evening when the crime occurred. So, she had an alibi. Dina did not try to hide her attitude towards Ashley from the investigators. She especially didn't like the fact that Ashley was pregnant. However, the fact that Dina did not feel anything about Ashley's death was not enough to bring any charges against her. So, the investigators let her go home after the conversation. Meanwhile, the results of the ballistic examination came in. The experts analyzed the location of Ashley's wounds, the position she was found in, and where the casings lay. The angle at which the bullets entered Ashley's body allowed them to determine the approximate height of the shooter. They believed that the perpetrator was about 5 feet and 10 inches tall. Dina Williams's height was around 5 feet and 5 inches, which meant it was unlikely that she was the one who shot Ashley. However, Dina had a twin brother, Thomas Williams, who matched the alleged height of the perpetrator. According to rumors, a few months before Ashley's death, Thomas had asked several people about how to cause a miscarriage. People also said that Thomas did everything his sister asked him to do. The investigators became interested in this and questioned Thomas Williams, but he denied everything, and there was no evidence indicating his involvement in the crime, so he was released. While the police were putting all the evidence they had together to find the culprit, residents wanted to do something to show their support to Ashley's family. They created an improvised memorial with flowers, stuffed toys, and candles. Someone brought 2 crosses, one with Ashley's name and the other with Landon's. While the investigators were looking for new evidence, Ashley's family was preparing for the funeral. It is impossible to imagine what they had to go through because they lost 2 people at once. During the autopsy, the medical examiner removed the fetus from Ashley's body. Ashley and Landon were buried in the same coffin. The fact that the one who committed this crime was still at large made the Lyons family even more devastated. For information that could help arrest the one who took their daughter's life, Ashley's parents put out a $3,000 reward that eventually went up to $5,000. People started calling the police and telling them what they thought might help the investigation. Soon after, they received a call from a woman whose house windows overlooked the park where someone shot Ashley. She reported that she may have seen the perpetrator. Standing at the window, this woman saw someone run out of the park and jump over the fence. Next, the person she saw ran up to a red pickup truck waiting for them with the engine running and got into the passenger seat. Moments later, the truck sped away. According to the witness, it was a red Chevrolet pickup truck. If the person the woman saw really had something to do with Ashley's death, then investigators had to look for not one criminal, but at least two. After all, whoever was driving the red pickup truck could be an accomplice to the crime. Upon hearing about the red pickup truck, everyone who knew Ashley immediately realized who was behind it. Roger, her ex-boyfriend, the father of her unborn child, had such a car. The police immediately seized Roger's truck. They thoroughly searched it but found no evidence inside. Roger refused to talk to the investigators, and there was no evidence against him. However, knowing that at least two people were involved in the crime, the officers made an obvious conclusion. Who didn't like Ashley? Who wasn't happy about her pregnancy? Who would be happy if Ashley disappeared? Besides Roger, there was only one person who could wish for this, and this person was Dina Williams. That's why the investigators decided to have another conversation with Dina and her brother Thomas. They questioned Thomas first. During the first conversation with the police, Thomas denied everything, but now, having learned that the eyewitness saw Roger's pickup truck at the crime scene, he became more talkative. When asked if he knew who shot Ashley Lyons, he immediately replied without hesitation that it was Roger McBeath. Thomas Williams eventually made a deal with the investigation to secure a less severe sentence for himself. He confessed that he had given Roger the gun, and Roger was the one who shot Ashley. Thomas also told the investigators that after taking Ashley's life, Roger threw the weapon in Elkhorn Creek. It took a lot of time for the police to find the crime weapon, but the 6-hour dive search was successful. The ballistics examination confirmed that the gun the police found was the weapon of the crime. The investigators knew that it wasn't Dina who shot Ashley because she didn't match the height of the perpetrator. However, they questioned her again, and she confessed that she was the getaway driver on the evening when Roger committed the crime. The police arrested Roger McBeath, Dina Williams, and her twin brother Thomas. It became clear that Roger did not want Ashley to have the baby, but Ashley was happy. She wanted to become a mother, and her family supported her decision to have this child. So Roger came up with an insidious plan. He invited Ashley to meet him and his parents at a restaurant to lure her to Scott County Park. Dina Williams drove him there, and he walked up to Ashley's car with a gun in his hand. Seeing the father of her unborn child, Ashley rolled down the window and reached into her purse to get the ultrasound pictures. She didn't expect him to shoot her. By pulling the trigger 3 times, Roger took the life of both Ashley and his own son. Then he ran out of the park, got into the pickup truck, and told Dina to hit the gas. On the way, they made a stop and got rid of the gun, throwing it into the river. When it became known who was behind this crime, the residents of Stamping Ground were shocked. They didn't expect that someone they knew would be capable of such a brutal crime. Equally frightening was the fact that several people were involved in this. Roger McBeath pleaded not guilty. In preparing for the trial of McBeath, the authorities made a mistake, ultimately influencing the verdict. But I'll tell you about this at the end of the video. As for Thomas Williams, the court sentenced him to 7 years in prison for his involvement in this crime. In the plea agreement, Williams admitted he accepted $1,000 from Roger McBeath Jr. to injure Ashley Lyons in such a way that it would cause her to miscarry. The act was never carried out, with Williams then agreeing to give McBeath the gun used in the murder, according to court records. In 2005, Dina Williams pleaded guilty. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors have recommended Williams serve a total of 20 years in prison, making her eligible for parole after she has served 85% or 17 years of her term. During the trial, prosecutors planned to put several witnesses on the stand who claimed Williams said she wished Ashley Lyons was dead. had plotted with McBeath to poison Ashley and had offered people $1,000 to cause Ashley to miscarry by beating her up, the court document said. According to prosecutors, Williams and McBeath resorted to more drastic measures after their original plans failed. Williams said her attorney, public defender Rodney Barnes, told her a jury would probably have found her guilty. "I'm hurt, and I'm scared because I pleaded guilty to something that I didn't do," she said. Williams acknowledged she took McBeath to the park the night of Ashley's murder so he could view the ultrasound pictures of the couple's unborn son, but said she drove around the Colony subdivision while they met and later came to pick him up. She heard 3 gunshots during her drive, but at the time, she did not know what they were, Williams said. "He involved me in the plan without me knowing," Williams said of McBeath. Williams said Roger then called Ashley Lyons on his phone, telling her he loved her and was sorry he had missed meeting her at the park. The jury heard the recording of this message at McBeath's trial. According to Williams, when leaving the park, McBeath never told her that Ashley Lyons was dead, and she never told police about what had happened for fear of what McBeath would do, saying he was abusive toward her. "I was scared to death of that boy," Williams said. "He even threatened to kill me." Williams said she regretted everything that happened and felt terribly for the Lyons family. "I am so sorry," Williams said, crying. "I wish I could go back and change this." However, McBeath's parents, Roger Sr. and Rita, said that Williams was lying, calling her a compulsive liar who often acted in the heat of the moment. The couple said Williams was jealous of Ashley and had agreed to the plea deal to take the easy way out. "She was obsessed with my son," Rita McBeath said. "She was the one who had the motive." When they later got the call that Ashley Lyons was dead, Roger McBeath Sr. said his son was in shock, but Williams was unfazed. "It didn't bother her," he said of Williams. "It didn't bother her a bit." In August 2005, the court sentenced Dina Williams to 20 years in prison. She was released on parole in 2021. In the written motion, Williams said she was very young and easily persuaded by her then-boyfriend McBeath. Williams also said she had no knowledge of the relationship between McBeath and Lyons. Furthermore, Williams said she was not the main offender of the crime and has already served approximately 70% of her sentence for her role in the crime. Williams noted in the court filing that she had completed various programs in prison, including courses on anger management, resident legal aid training, horticulture landscaping, and how to be a certified Braille transcriber. After his arrest, Roger pleaded not guilty to the murder charge. The jury convicted him, but he managed to get his conviction overturned by the Kentucky Supreme Court because a jail informant overstepped his bounds by questioning McBeath in jail about the shooting, and the defense was not allowed to question the informant. John Romano, a jail informant, was instructed by the police not to ask Roger McBeath questions about the crime he was accused of. The informant was allowed to have ordinary conversations with McBeath about everyday things, such as sports and movies. The police hoped McBeath would start talking about the crime himself without the leading questions. The Kentucky Supreme Court ruled prosecutors used illegally obtained evidence and overturned the verdict. In 2009, Roger was retried, and this time he pleaded guilty to complicity to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. The court then handed him a 42-year prison sentence with eligibility for parole in 16 years. The court also sentenced him to 5 years for complicity to evidence tampering, which would run concurrently with his previous sentence. McBeath's parole hearing took place in December 2023. "She was my high school sweetheart. She was the mother of my child. She was someone I loved," said McBeath. McBeath told the parole board he was not interested in parole. "I'm not here to convince you all to give me parole. I know I don't deserve it," said McBeath. "But I do want to use this time to say that I'm truly sorry for what I did. I want to tell Ashley's family that I'm truly sorry for what I did, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it." McBeath said he didn't wish to continue the hearing after declining his parole eligibility. Thus, he is currently still in prison. In honor of Ashley Lyons, Scott County Park, where she died, now has the Angel Garden with ceramic angel statues. After Ashley's death, Carol and her husband, Buford Lyons, helped pass a fetal homicide law at both the state and federal levels. Under the bill, violence against a pregnant woman is considered two crimes, one against the woman and the other against her unborn child. This here story is about 26-year-old Elle Edwards. On Christmas Eve 2022, she was celebrating with her friends in a pub in Ali Village, Liverpool, UK. The gal was real vibrant and beautiful. She worked as a cosmetologist in a local beauty salon and was also an assistant to a dermatologist. Elle was naturally positive and mighty kind, which allowed her to win over even the most demanding clients. Elle was purty and had become an excellent specialist in her fields. The gal was cheerful and always smiling. But at the same time, she remained determined, constantly moving towards her goals and dreams. On December 24th, G22, her sister Lucy flew in from Dubai to spend the holidays with the family, and Elle eagerly awaited her return. They decided to celebrate this long-awaited event in style, so the girls and their friends headed to the local pub. Here they had a great time, laughing a lot, dancing, and singing karaoke. In the merry atmosphere, no one noticed that a person to whom kindness was alien was nearby. Round 11:50 p.m., an emergency call came in. As they were exiling the pub, no less than 12 shots were fired, and 2 of them hit Elle. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head that proved to be mighty serious. The dispatcher directed emergency services to the same. They urgently arrived at the pub, loaded the gal into an ambulance, and took her to the local hospital. However, she died on the way, as her injuries was incompatible with life. When the police informed the victim's family about the tragedy, they was in a state of shock. No one believed it, and no one understood how this could have happened to Elle. No one suspected that this beautiful and cheerful girl could have had deadly enemies. In the early stages of the investigation, the detectives had no leads. The assailant had attacked unexpectedly and disappeared just as mysteriously, leaving only a shell casing and the bleeding victim at the crime scene. The attack was sudden but well planned and gave Elle no chance of survival. But was the gal the true target of the attack, or did she become a random victim of a madman? An unknown car stopped near the pub entrance, and minutes later the shooting started. In addition to the deceased, 4 other men received gunshot wounds of varying severity, all of them young people aged 22 to 33 who were spending the evening in the establishment and lived in the nearby towns. Initially, the police were inclined to believe that the murdered woman was a random victim. It was known that criminal gangs were operating in the area periodically. The shooting was likely a routine showdown between their members. However, all of this was just conjecture, which would have to be proven or disproved in the course of the investigation. So the detectives delved deeper into the victim's personality. Like the witnesses to the crime, the victim's relatives were at a loss as to who could have wanted Elle's death, as the girl seemed to have no ill wishes or enemies capable of such horrors. The detectives decided to interview other witnesses and the victims of the unknown criminal's gunfire. In addition, law enforcement officers requested the pub owner's video surveillance recordings. It would be necessary to talk to dozens of people and analyze several hours of video recordings. Several police officers were working on the extensive investigation. It was necessary to answer several difficult questions. There were too many victims of the attack. But was this spontaneous aggression? Or did the perpetrator pursue a specific target? All witnesses to the incident were interrogated. However, checking mobile communications data took more time. The media were notified to assist in the investigation. Law enforcement officers urged anyone with valuable information to come to the police station. First and foremost, this concerned possible video recordings made by random eyewitnesses, on any of which the car in which the aggressor arrived might appear. After the crime, the police held a meeting with local residents. The purpose of this communication was to persuade people possessing valuable information to share it with law enforcement officers. It was assumed that someone might have seen the moment of the attack or know the criminal. People were urged not to be afraid of the criminals and the local feuding clans. Community leaders supported local residents during this difficult time. In addition to the conversations, activists went door to door and communicated with the neighbors. Special trained officers worked with the family of the deceased, their goal being to provide them with support in connection with the heavy loss. In the course of this work, it was established that the perpetrator had left the pub parking lot in a dark-colored car. Eyewitness accounts regarding it may differed. It was dark, and it was difficult to make out anything, but the most likely was a dark Mercedes A-Class. Later, this was confirmed after checking the outdoor surveillance cameras. The killer did not immediately open fire, but drove up to the parking lot and observed the pub visitors for some time. He sat in the car so that he could freely see the entrance and most of what was happening inside. Apparently, he was choosing the most convenient moment for the attack. After a few minutes of surveillance, when Elle came out, the criminal quickly got out of the car, fired 12 shots, then instantly got back behind the wheel and disappeared. Investigators, after studying the recordings, made an important conclusion. The attacker was alone. No one helped him. It was not possible to trace the exact location where the perpetrator fled. Therefore, the detectives went door to door to all local residents, describing the car and recounting the circumstances of the incident, trying to establish the identity of the killer. Patrolling the streets was carried out around the clock, and this yielded results. Just 2 days after the shooting, detectives detained 2 suspects, but no names were mentioned until all the circumstances were clarified. However, it was not possible to prove their involvement in the crime, in particular because the murder weapon was not found. After that, the detectives made a statement to the public, saying that they would not rest until the unknown shooter was punished. All this was intended to calm the local residents, who were outraged by the rampant crime and the powerlessness of the authorities. It was also assumed that the attack had been provoked by a feud between local gangs. In this case, Elle would be considered a random victim. However, all this was also just an assumption that remained to be verified. In the course of the investigation, it was possible to establish that the potential targets could have been Jake Duttley and Kiram Seld, members of the local Beechwood gang, who were spending the evening in the pub. It became known that they had been in long-term, fierce conflict with another group claiming this territory. On December 29, the police arrested another person, but he was not the one who opened fire. The suspect had a solid alibi that excluded him from the list of suspects. However, the detective suspected that he had participated in the setup for the attack. Around the same time, the dark Mercedes car in which the killer had left the pub parking lot was identified, but due to the lack of direct evidence, the name of the third suspect was also not disclosed. There were some difficulties with the found car. The car was traced through video surveillance systems and identified thanks to the cameras, but law enforcement officers were too late. On December 31, the police department received the report that a fire had started near the scene of the shooting. When the special services arrived at the scene, they found a dark Mercedes similar to the perpetrator's vehicle, which was engulfed in flames. The vehicle was completely burned out. Valuable evidence was lost in the flames. The perpetrators clearly knew that the police were on their trail, so they decided to destroy one of the direct pieces of evidence. Despite the fact that the fire did not completely destroy the car, it was confirmed that it had been used during the shooting. However, the Mercedes did not belong to the perpetrators, but had been stolen shortly before the attack. Presumably, the arson was committed intentionally to complicate the investigation after the murder of competitors. On January 11, 2 more suspects, a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman, were delivered to the police department. They were arrested in Central Wales. The man's name was Connor Chapman. He was well known to the police. He had an extensive criminal record that he had accumulated over the past 5 years before the murder of Elle Edwards. Connor had started with daring lawbreakings and gradually sank deeper into the abyss of crime. One of his first serious crimes was a car theft under aggravating circumstances. He had repeatedly become a suspect in robberies, hooliganism, and threatening behavior. Once the young man was involved in a chase with the police, after which he abandoned the car and hid in the bushes nearby. When they detained him, the criminal said that he did not understand what chase they were talking about and that he was here just waiting for a friend. In this case, he became the real star. The detainee's data ended up in newspaper headlines. Connor Chapman was from Birkenhead, Liverpool. His parents had left him at an early age, so his grandparents had formalized guardianship. It was in a house that the hero of the story moved. The teenager dropped out of high school shortly before the exams. In general, he studied poorly and no special hopes were pinned on him. He was always considered a problem child. The young hooligan first became a defendant in a court case in 2014, when he was 14 years old. Connor was accused of shoplifting. As early as 2016, he committed another crime. His involvement in the theft of a car was proven when the young man was detained in a stolen vehicle. He did not have a driver's license or insurance, which was a violation of the terms of his suspended sentence. In 2017, car theft was added to the storage of prohibited substances. During this period, he was also under police supervision, so he had again violated the restraining order. As a result, he was banned from accessing several parts of the city. Connor was not allowed to appear in public places, as he clearly posed a threat to society. However, as early as 2018, he violated the ban again. The patrol detained him in a public place. The young man had a knife and prohibited substances with him. In the same year, the general public first heard about Connor Chaplin. He appeared on the pages of the local newspaper after an unsuccessful attempt to escape from the police in a stolen car. The city patrol noticed a stolen Audi on the street and ordered the driver to stop and get out of the car with his hands up. However, the 18-year-old Chapman did not obey, provoking a chase. During the short flight, Connor committed a large number of traffic violations. In particular, he accelerated to more than 80 kilometers per hour in areas with a 30-kilometer limit. Connor repeatedly drove into oncoming traffic and in the end crashed into the curb. At the beat, the car was thrown aside and turned around. The driver could not continue the orgy, so he got out of the car and ran away. However, even here he was unlucky, as the patrol caught up with him in the bushes just a few hundred meters away. In his defense, the young man said that he was waiting here for a friend, but the deception was obvious. The lawyer of Connor explained in court that his client had fallen under the influence of a bad company of older frays. The court left him unpunished and the need to release the budding criminal. He was found to have attention deficit disorder and a number of other disorders identified by private specialists during the trial. Despite this, due to numerous violations and potentially dangerous behavior on the road, he was sentenced to a term of up to 8 months in prison for 2 minors. The young man also received a ban on driving a car, which was in effect after his release. Thus, the budding criminal had achieved 14 convictions for 30 criminal episodes by the time he reached adulthood. It was obvious that he had no intention of changing and categorically refused to fit into society. Everyone understood that he was potentially dangerous, but legal grounds for isolating him from society had not been found. This was due to the fact that so far no person had been seriously injured by his inadequate behavior. The public was outraged by the powerlessness of the authorities. Everything was shaping up so that the criminal elements could do nothing until they kill or maim innocent people. And that's how it turned out. In January 2020, the court again sentenced Connor Chapman, this time to 10 months in prison. He was again caught in a public place with a cold weapon and substances in his pocket. A whole bouquet of prohibitive lists. During this period, the police openly appeared on TV channels, urging the public to beware of this young man. After serving his sentence, protected months, he again got involved in crime and was wanted for at least 5 criminal episodes. When he was caught, the young criminal said that he had spent more time behind bars than free, and he did not seem upset about this, but rather proud of his achievements. However, Connor had no intention of stopping there. By the age of 20, his service record had expanded again. By this point, he had received 19 sentences for 43 crimes. But in the summer of 2022, the inadequate young man found himself free again. This happened just 6 months before the death of Elle Edwards. During this period, Connor was again brought before the court. His lawyer tried to play on pity, telling the story that the first child of the young man was born while he was in prison. At this point, his girlfriend was pregnant with a girl. The young man claimed that he had rethought his life and wanted to get on the path of correction. Of course, these were loud, false words. The only thing he wanted was to get free and return to the path of crime. During this period, the police already knew that he was a member of one of the local criminal gangs engaged in the sale of prohibited substances. However, the criminal was tried not for these serious crimes, but for burglary and theft of 2 electric motorcycles. On December 24, 2022, a skirmish broke out between 2 rival criminal gangs. They began to argue over the division of the territory near the wooden church in Beechwood Estates. They failed to reach an agreement, after which the young gangster decided to take revenge. He armed himself with a submachine gun and waited for about 3 hours until he tracked down his targets. He wanted to kill Karen Seld and Jake Duffy, who had gone to the Moyak pub for rest. Shortly before midnight, the criminal drove up to the parking lot and began to observe. He identified his victims and waited for the right moment to attack, then ran out of the car and fired 12 bullets into the building. He managed to seriously injure Duffy, but despite the threat to his life, he survived the attack. However, the unlucky Elle Edwards was not so fortunate. 2 bullets hit her in the head. The young beauty fought for her life, but died in the arms of the medics on the way to the hospital. The girl accidentally met the killer's targets that evening, and did not even suspect that the festive revelry could end so tragically. The pub was crowded, then one person was killed and 4 were wounded. One 22-year-old man was shot in the leg, a 24-year-old young man was wounded in the arm, and a 33-year-old man in the wrist. None of these injuries were life-threatening. Elle's friends tried to provide her with assistance and perform artificial respiration right on the spot. However, this was not enough to save her life. Elle's sister Lucy was much like Dia. She lived in Dubai and flew home to celebrate Christmas with her family. Just minutes before the attack, she had left the establishment, so she was not affected at all. Later, Lucy recalled how she had wanted to take her sister with her, but the girl wanted to stay with her friends. On January 25, 2023, the funeral of the young girl took place. Hundreds of concerned people came to say goodbye to the random victim of gang showdowns. The body was brought to the local church in a hearse drawn by 4 white horses. Even the pub that had become the site of the girl's last celebration was closed that day as a mark of respect for her memory. The owner of the establishment published a message of support for Elle's family on his official social media page. Connor Chapman was charged with a whole list of charges, the main one of which was murder. It became known that the perpetrator had an accomplice, namely the 20-year-old Thomas. After the arrest and during the searches, a video recording was found on this young man, which had been made shortly before the attack. In it, Connor is handing over a weapon and saying that he is going to settle accounts with someone. After the attack, they together hid the stolen Mercedes in order to get rid of it later. The murder weapon was never found. However, the killer's DNA traces were found on one of the shell casings fired. It was obvious that it was Connor who loaded the weapon before the attack. In addition, red gloves were found during searches in his house, which were clearly visible in the CCTV footage from morning. After the crime, when the perpetrators had abandoned the car, they ordered a taxi under a false name. They used the driver's services to cover their tracks and confuse the investigation. Around 5 a.m. they returned to the place where the hidden car was located. Here the criminals tried to cover their tracks. However, something went wrong. Ultimately, they decided to get rid of the car by setting it on fire. Thomas Nord was found guilty on all charges brought against him. In July 2023, the court sentenced him to 9 years in prison. This modest sentence was due to the fact that he had not yet managed to accumulate such a wide criminal history as his accomplice. Jake and Karen were wounded in the moment of the attack, but both managed to survive the assault. A look at their lifestyle made the aggression of one of the members of the rival gangs quite understandable. Both were members of the local Beechwood gang, which was openly in conflict with another group claiming this territory. It became known that on December 23, 2023, just a day before the attack with firearms, they had already been attacked. On that occasion, another person from Connor Chapman's group had assaulted them. Both were beaten, but did not receive serious injuries. Apparently, they considered this a random fight and calmly went to relax in the pub. While the shooter awaited his sentence in the case of the murder of the innocent victim, both targets of his attack were already in prison. Curran was sentenced to 27 months in prison for an attack on members of the rival criminal group. Another 9 months were added to the sentence for the fight. His friend was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months for a similar offense. Obviously, they were trying to avenge the attempted murder. Prohibitive court orders were also issued against both of them, with a whole list of restrictions. Of course, this method did not allow protecting citizens from this gang of criminals. However, in case of further violations, more severe punishment could be applied to them due to ignoring the prescriptions. The public was outraged that potentially dangerous members of criminal gangs were getting away with minimum sentences after each crime. The bans were clearly ineffective and did not contribute absolutely anything to public safety. This became especially obvious when it was found that Chapman already had a ban on visiting that region where the pub was located. But this did not prevent him from stealing a car and coming to the public place, despite the fact that he also had a driving ban. The events that had occurred once again raised the question of toughening punishments and revising the existing norms of the legal system. However, so far this flawed system has not suffered any serious changes. At the trial on the case of Elle's murder, Connor tried to refute that it was he who appeared on the CCTV footage. According to him, during this period he was at home, packing Christmas gifts. However, a sufficient amount of evidence was collected to expose the lie. The hearings on the case lasted 3.5 weeks, during which all the circumstances preceding the attack were revealed. It became known that the reason for the attack was only the competition between the two criminal gangs dividing the territory nearby. The defendant did not even know the victim. He simply did not care about her fate, as well as the fate of all the other innocent people in the bar. He was driven only by blind fury, which he could never control. After the attempted murder of 2 competitors, Connor planned to flee to Spain to cover his tracks. He used a stolen car and also got rid of the murder weapon. Trying not to fall into the hands of the police, he avoided using any mode of transport. The detectives detained the criminal literally at the airport. After the arrest, Connor tried to deceive the police, claiming that the Mercedes he was seen driving on the day of the murder was not stolen. According to him, this was a common car of the criminal group, which they used for the distribution of substances. The guy claimed that he was not behind the wheel of the vehicle and also continued to convince the jury that he did not open fire that evening. He was desperately trying to get out of the situation. The defendant stated that he had only just learned that someone from the criminal group had used the vehicle for an attack on the pub. Before the jury retired to consider the verdict, the father of the innocent victim made a short speech. He sincerely hoped that the criminal would never again be able to spend Christmas with his loved ones in freedom. The jurors, consisting of Pityashin and Sanjenshin, came to a unanimous decision after 3 hours of discussion. In their opinion, Connor Chapman was guilty of all the charges brought against him. He cynically committed the crime and did not repent of the fact that he accidentally killed the beautiful 26-year-old girl. The whole life that lay ahead of her, and he took it away. Instead of remorse, the heartless Connor spent several days carefully getting rid of all the evidence and traces of the murder that could link him to this bloody event. The motive for the attack was the competition between criminal games. On July 7, 2023, Connor was sentenced. He was sent to serve a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 48 years from the start of serving the sentence. After the verdict was announced, the victim's father victoriously raised his fist. The incident provoked a wave of public outrage. The residents of the city could not feel safe, knowing that they were at the junction of the confrontation between criminal games dividing spheres of influence. They knew that these people had a large amount of firearms and were not afraid to use them, as proved by the murder of Elle. The girl's father said he wanted to set up a foundation to support victims like his daughter. He believed that the main goal would be to fight to reduce the number of weapons in the hands of civilians. The case of Nancy Paola Reyes Gorces. What led to the crime against the pregnant woman, and what became of the child? The quest for personal happiness and a better life can be long, fraught with difficulties, and doesn't always yield the desired outcome. Many people are drawn to other countries or even the other side of the world in these pursuits. But sometimes, instead of finding the expected happiness, they encounter only pain, deep disillusionment, or even death. In the pursuit of dreams and overarching goals, it is crucial to remain aware of the people around us. The story of a young Guatemalan woman named Nancy Paola Reyes Gorces has become one of the most resonant cases in Spain in recent years. The mother of 2 left Central America to cross the ocean in search of employment that could provide her daughters with a decent life and assist her elderly parents. However, the woman never returned home. Fragments of her disfigured and unrecognizable body were found with difficulty in desolate and nearly impassable areas. At the time of her crime, she was 4 months pregnant, and the perpetrator was someone Gorces had hoped to share her life with. Challenging life in Guatemala. Little is known about the early years of the woman named Nancy Paola Reyes Gorces. She was born on April 13, 1991, in a small village named Granados, in the Republic of Guatemala. Nancy was the second of 5 children in a very poor family. Her parents, Jorge and Prudencia Gorces, struggled to make ends meet. Despite this, they did everything possible to ensure their children received a good education and could live better than they did. After finishing school, Nancy was able to enroll at the university in the city of Villanueva, where she studied business administration and document management. She was a diligent student and graduated with honors. However, despite her academic achievements, significant career prospects did not follow. She worked as a cashier in a large supermarket during her studies and later was promoted to administrator, but her career progression stalled there. During her university years, Nancy lived in an unregistered marriage with a young man, whose name is not mentioned in public records, with whom she had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, This relationship did not lead to a long-term commitment, and the couple separated. The father of the girls subsequently lost interest in the fate of his children and did not provide any financial support. Decision to relocate. Nancy continued to live in her parents' house, now with her own daughters, working at the supermarket and seeing no future prospects. The family barely had enough money for essentials, and something had to change. In 2013, Nancy's older sister emigrated to the United States, where she soon found a good job, married successfully, and settled well. Inspired by her sister, Nancy decided to radically change her life too, but she chose to relocate to Europe, settling on sunny Spain. At that time, she didn't even have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone funds needed for initial expenses. For several years, Gorseys worked diligently, saving enough money to finally make her dream come true in the summer of 2018. In July, she bought a ticket to Madrid and promised her parents that she would keep in constant contact so they wouldn't worry about her. She planned to find housing and a job upon arrival. She carried a few €1,000, enough to rent a room, cover food, and the most necessary items until she could secure a steady income. At the time of her departure, Nancy was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. Nancy didn't stay long in Madrid. After living in Barcelona for some time, she moved to the city of Ciudad Real, the center of the Spanish province of the same name. She called home almost daily, asking about her family's well-being, and she regularly sent money home, which increasingly helped her parents not only fully support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Nancy mentioned she didn't have an official stable job and was making ends meet through odd jobs, like cleaning in affluent homes or caring for the elderly and sick. Nancy never complained about the hardships. On the contrary, she told her family that Europe offered more opportunities, and she could never have earned as much back home, even working around the clock with no days off. It seemed she was completely satisfied with how her life was unfolding, and even spoke of eventually bringing her daughters to Spain once she saved enough to rent a spacious and comfortable home for the whole family. A fateful romance. For a while, Nancy didn't share much about her personal life, claiming she simply had no time due to work. But in the spring of 2020, she admitted to her parents that she had met a man with whom she had started a romantic relationship. His name was Carlos Andres Bustamante, and they had met by chance while Gorseys was looking for new rental housing. As they resolved this issue, the couple grew closer and eventually started living together. Carlos was a year older than his beloved and, at the start of their relationship, did not have a steady income, surviving on random small jobs. In fact, Nancy was the main breadwinner in their relationship. She paid for housing and bills and often gave Carlos money for his personal needs and expenses. However, she never complained to her family about this, so her parents were confident that everything was fine, and their daughter had met a good man with whom she lived in love, harmony, and abundance. By that time, Nancy's 2 younger brothers had also moved to Spain, with whom she kept in touch. She was particularly close to Dennis, the youngest brother, who had even met Carlos personally and found him likable. At the end of June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to the resort city of Santander, located on the Atlantic coast. In a phone conversation with her family, Nancy mentioned that the climate was warmer and better there, and she saw more job prospects. However, at that time, certain difficulties began to appear in her relationship with Carlos, which she tried not to discuss with anyone. Bustamante turned out to be jealous, temperamental, and quite cruel. Moreover, he lacked any career ambitions and was completely satisfied being supported by a woman. Most alarmingly, he abused alcohol and occasionally indulged in forbidden substances, although he constantly tearfully promised to quit and find a stable job. Gorseys was openly doubting whether to continue her life with this man when she discovered she was pregnant. Carlos was thrilled by this news and swore that from now on, their life would change for the better, but in reality, things only got worse. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from his civil wife or asking his mother for it. Moreover, he began to physically abuse Nancy, something she tried to keep from everyone. Alarming signals. On the evening of August 12th, while Nancy was video chatting with her parents, they suddenly heard Carlos loudly shouting and berating their daughter, demanding to know who she was talking to. He didn't believe her when she said she was speaking with her mother and snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by looking at the screen, he simply threw the device onto a chair and walked away. The next day, the situation repeated itself. Carlos again grabbed the phone from Nancy's hands while she was talking to her parents and daughters. He demanded to see who she was speaking with, insulted her, and even threatened harm. A frightened Nancy later explained to her relatives that her partner was just overly jealous and tried to reassure them that everything was fine. Her parents, however, tried to persuade her to contact the police, but she insisted that she could handle the situation herself. However, on August 17th, during a candid phone conversation with her sister, Garcés ominously stated that if anything happened to her, or if she suddenly died, Carlos would be solely to blame. Her words were chilling, but she did not elaborate further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard Nancy's voice. Mysterious disappearance of the pregnant woman. On August 20th, around 2 p.m, Nancy sent a text message to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did, nor the next day, which was unusual for her. She also did not respond to calls from her family, prompting them to try contacting Carlos, but he did not answer his phone either. Since the couple had recently moved to Santander and had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country and couldn't quickly arrive to check on her, the situation was alarming. A few days later, a strange message came from Carlos's phone stating that he and Nancy had argued and decided to split up. Allegedly, she had packed her things and left in search of a separate apartment, was ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she might be. Her brothers then suggested that Carlos should immediately come to Ciudad Real so they could go to the police together and file a missing person report. Carlos readily agreed, but as expected, he never showed up, did not file the report, and on top of everything else, he too stopped communicating with the Garcés family. Mother knew everything. The relatives of the missing woman themselves contacted the police to report her disappearance. Meanwhile, through Nancy's friends, her brothers found the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, introduced themselves, and explained the situation, she unexpectedly broke down in tears, confessing that she had suspected her son could do something terrible to his partner, but she did not elaborate on the details. Sandra also had no idea where her son and future daughter-in-law were. Carlos wasn't answering her calls, but only sent brief messages asking her not to ask questions and to give him some time. She liked Nancy, but knew her son too well and understood what he was capable of. The next day, Sandra was called in for questioning at the police station. Law enforcement wanted to discuss the disappearance of her would-be daughter-in-law and to find out the possible whereabouts of Carlos. She shared with the officers what she had already told the girls' brothers the day before and showed them a lengthy text message that Nancy had sent her a couple of days before she vanished. In the message, Nancy pleaded with Sandra never to give her son money, regardless of the tearful stories he might concoct. According to Garcés, he would spend it all on alcohol and banned substances, under the influence of which he became very aggressive and cruel. He had no desire to find a job or battle his addictions, and his behavior became increasingly threatening, prompting the pregnant woman to consider leaving him. She ended her message by saying it was better to end things now, before anyone got hurt. Another disturbing detail also came to light. It turned out that Carlos had several prior convictions for causing bodily harm, and one of his first victims had been his own mother, whom he had brutally beaten when he was just a 17-year-old teenager. At that time, he had gotten off with probation, but later, after leaving his family home, he had served short terms for assaulting women with whom he lived and tried to form relationships. The oldest profession. The investigation was just beginning, but in the first few days, many curious details emerged that indicated this union was doomed from the start. In addition to Carlos being an aggressive, unemployed drug addict with a criminal record and suffering from uncontrollable bouts of rage, friends of Nancy revealed something interesting about her as well. It turned out that the woman was not merely a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had told her parents, because cleaning houses and caring for the elderly would never have brought in as much money as she was sending home every month. The slender, dark-haired Guatemalan with a striking appearance provided escort services to wealthy Spaniards and visitors alike. Indeed, her work was connected to the odd and sudden move to the resort port city of Santander, where she had more opportunities to earn. Carlos knew about his beloved's occupation, and initially he was fine with it since she fully supported them both, eliminating the need for him to find work himself. However, when she became pregnant, he began to lose his mind. Firstly, he was tormented by doubts about whether he was the father of the child, suspecting it might be one of Nancy's clients. Secondly, she continued to work even in her condition, and Bustamante was insanely jealous. He alternated between forbidding her to meet and talk with other men and forcing her to work when they ran out of money to live on. The money that the man took from his mother, he spent exclusively on himself and his vices. Horrific discoveries. In a rented apartment, for nearly a week, there had been no known whereabouts of Nancy and Carlos. Carlos had been in touch, but only responded with messages and never disclosed his location. Surprisingly, it wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a warrant to search the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. What they found there was truly shocking and left no doubt that Nancy was no longer alive. Blood traces were found virtually everywhere in the apartment. Some attempts had been made to clean them up, but for the most part, they were visible even to the naked eye. In the clogged drains of the bathroom and toilet, fragments of bones, hair, as well as pieces of skin and internal organs were discovered. Forensic analysis confirmed that all belonged to the missing woman, although her remains were not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally ended, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos immediately became the prime suspect in the case. He remained unreachable, and his whereabouts were unknown. Also found in the apartment was a package from a small hatchet purchased at a local hardware store. The tool itself was not found, but Carlos Bustamante's clear fingerprints were on the package. Security footage from that store showed that on August 20th, Carlos bought the hatchet, a pair of sturdy rubber gloves, and large trash bags. At a market near their home, he purchased a small cart from an elderly vendor, who immediately recognized the suspect from a photo shown to him. Arrest and search for the body. The day after the grim discoveries in the apartment, an unsuspecting Carlos unexpectedly turned himself in at a police station in Madrid. Trying to deflect suspicion from himself, he went to report Nancy missing, but was immediately arrested as the main suspect in the gruesome crime. Carlos claimed he had nothing to do with what happened, stating they had argued and parted ways on August 20th. He said he left town in a fit of emotion and was unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to the apartment to gather her belongings. Carlos's version sounded far-fetched, especially after police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. In the following days, nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline were thoroughly searched with the help of divers, but no trace of Nancy was found. The police then decided to track all of Carlos's movements from August 20th to the 26th, using his mobile phone signals. It turned out he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast, and had also visited the cities of Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to cover his tracks, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel around the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage showed that on the evening of August 20th, he walked toward a large natural forest park. He returned to the apartment late at night and then went out again, this time with a cart filled with oddly shaped bags. There were few cameras in the park itself, so once Carlos entered the wooded area, he disappeared and later reappeared with the same cart, which was now much lighter. He then headed toward the railway tracks, beyond which was a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. From there, he returned much lighter, giving law enforcement a clear indication of where to look for the body. Where is the child? It wasn't until September 16th that bags containing highly decomposed human remains were found in thick underbrush on the hillside. These remains were identified as those of the missing Nancy Gorseys, divided into 20 parts with a hatchet. According to security camera footage, everything Carlos transported in the cart was recovered, but something was still missing. Nancy, as we recall, was 4 months pregnant, yet her fetus was not found in any of the bags. The condition of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen showed merciless mutilation with a knife and hatchet, indicating that the perpetrator likely extracted the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Carlos consistently denied his involvement, gave conflicting statements, and continued to try to shift the blame onto an unknown assailant. However, traces of the victim's blood were found on his clothing and shoes, which he attempted but failed to completely wash off. Despite Bustamante's refusal to admit guilt, investigators were able to piece together the chain of tragic events and the full scenario of the crime. Forensic experts believe that on the afternoon of August 20th, following an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner in the kitchen, where traces of blood were found on the floor and walls. Carlos then moved Nancy's body to the bathroom and went shopping at a hardware store and the market. In the bathroom, he divided Nancy's body into 20 parts using a hatchet and a large kitchen knife, placed the pieces into bags, and loaded everything into a cart. He then went to the park, looking for secluded places to dispose of the body. Late at night, he left the apartment with the cart and followed a pre-planned route deep into the park, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. Trial and sentence. The whereabouts of the fetus Carlos removed from Nancy's body remain unknown. He denied his guilt and claimed he loved her. From the time of the gruesome crime until his arrest in Madrid, Bustamante lived off the money he stole from Gorseys, which he spent daily in bars across various cities. The investigation, the search for evidence and witnesses, took law enforcement nearly 2 years, and the trial of the murderer did not begin until July 2022. In November of the same year, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence handed down to the murderer to be too lenient. Bustamante was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison, and he was also ordered to pay financial compensation of 150,000 euros to the parents and daughters of the deceased woman.